Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Megan McManus. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Farm to Institution Specialist with MSU Center for Regional Food Systems. And I'm going to be your host today for our very short webinar. You're joining us for the fourth webinar of our series about the 2020 to 21 10 cents evaluation report. And in this series, we cover key findings of the evaluation, including all of the interesting and big takeaways from that really important year. I did want to note that our last webinar that was scheduled for February 15th was canceled, and we're going to be releasing a recording in the next few weeks. That one focused on what foods were served in the program, so keep an eye out for that one coming out soon. And then lastly, quick housekeeping note, since this is such a short webinar, max 30 minutes, we're going to be taking any questions at the very end, but please feel free to type them in the chat box as we go. I already see you have introduced yourself in the chat, so we're so glad you guys could all join us today. So on the agenda today, we're going to provide a really quick introduction to how the 10 cents program works, in case you aren't familiar with it. And then I'm going to share some of the key findings on how foods moved through the 10 cent supply chain. And then at the end, we'll hear from Lori Yelton from Michigan Department of Ag and Rural Development. She's on the call with us today, and she's going to talk more about resources for producers looking to sell to grantees in the program. So this program is formally known as 10 cents a meal for Michigan's kids and farms. I'll just be referencing this as 10 cents for the series, and it is a competitive state-funded grant, and it provides schools, early care and education sites, or ECEs, and other organizations participating in any USDA child nutrition program with match funding up to 10 cents per meal to purchase and serve Michigan-grown fruits, vegetables, and dry beans. And the program is implemented by the Michigan Department of Education. They run all of the administration of the program, like accepting grantees, they distribute funds and manage paperwork. But there are 3 other partners that help out with different program areas. And in short, Groundwork Center for Resilient Communities is the outreach and communications partner. They also help with advocacy. And then there's us with Center for Regional Food Systems. We are the evaluation partner. We make this report every year, and we also help with assistance for local food sourcing among farms, food suppliers, and grantees. And then lastly, there is the Michigan Department of Ag and Rural Development, and they're the key partner for agriculture, and they can help producers get connected to the resources they need to sell to grantees. And then that last note at the bottom there, this program is a matching grant, so it helps double the investment in Michigan grown produce. So for an example, if a grantee is awarded a $5,000 grant, they have to commit to spending at least $10,000 towards local food purchases. Now I'm going to run through some of the key findings for the 2020 to 21 school year. And I talked about this briefly in the last webinar, but I can't emphasize enough how this was one of the biggest years in the program for a couple of reasons. First, it was the program's first school year since the start of the pandemic in March 2020. So as you can imagine, the program changed greatly from when it was just a pilot before the pandemic to 2020 when food service operations and settings changed completely, and we saw huge impacts to the supply chain. And then second, early care and education sites were eligible to participate for the first time ever. This is a completely different kind of grantee than what we had before, which was just public schools. And we talked about this in the second webinar of the series. And then lastly, this was the first year that the program went statewide. The pilot program originally started in a really small specific region and then slowly grew from there. The last pilot year before this one, there were only 57 grantees in 27 counties. And this year, the program grew to 143 grantees across the state. So I'm going to dive into the key evaluation findings related to the 10 cent supply chain. And I wanted to start with a quick overview of the percent of spending on different Michigan grown foods. We actually dive much deeper into the food served through the program in webinar 3. And again, that recording will be coming out soon. But in this presentation, all you need to know was that the majority of spending was on fruits, which you can see here, 70% of all dollars spent on fruits. And then a little less than 1/3 were spent on vegetables. And then just 1% were spent on dry beans, which for us meant a huge opportunity for growth in future years. So now we're going to kind of move into the different market channels that were used by grantees during the year. A lot of people think of farm to school as just this first option above, where the farm sells their products directly to the grantee. However, the majority of purchases are not farm direct. We often see the farms selling their products to another vendor or distributor who then sells that to the grantee. In fact, most of the time, you'll see purchases like this last channel where the farm sells to the initial vendor or intermediary, who then sells the product to another vendor who sells it to the grantee. One example of this would be if a farm grew carrots and then they sold their products to a processor who chopped and cleaned them into baby carrots, and then they sold them to a distributor who then sold it to the grantee. We collect our purchasing information from the Michigan Department of Education, and all grantees are required to submit their invoices in order to get reimbursed in the program. And the Michigan Department of Ed puts that all into a spreadsheet for us to comb through and analyze. And what we found was that grantees reported purchasing from 150 different vendors across the state. And of those, 100 were farms. And as I talked about in the last slide, most grantees, or 93%, reported purchases using an intermediary market channel at least some point during the year. Now, for our report, we defined 8 different types of market channels. We saw that half of all the spending by grantees was through a broadline distributor. And for our purposes, a broadline distributor or full service distributor is a vendor that carries large volumes of a variety of products, such as cutlery and vegetables. In Michigan, public schools typically source most of their food from one primary broadline distributor. But we also saw nearly a third of spending was from food hubs. And if you don't know what that is, they are a food business that manages the aggregation, distribution, and marketing of locally produced foods. So they have that local food focus or maybe a regional food focus. And then there were plenty of other channels used throughout the year, like specialty distributors. They're distributors that specialize in a certain product category like produce. And we did see grantees purchase direct from farmers. Some of the less common channels included food processors. There was a farmer cooperative, which, if you're not familiar, it's a group of farmers working together to grow and sell their products. We did see grocery stores, and then there was a farmer's market used. Now, one really, really important part of the 10 cents program is that the legislation requires grantees to report the farm of origin for their purchases. And what that means is that the grantees must provide the name of the farm who grew the product they purchased, no matter what market channel they purchased it from. So of course, this is easiest for grantees to know when they purchase direct from the farm, but it can get trickier when they purchase from someone like a huge distributor that purchased from an intermediary who then purchased from the farm. And sometimes the vendor will advertise their product as Michigan grown, but they won't have that farm of origin easily identifiable to their customers. So these are a few of the reasons for why we'll have instances where a grantee submits an invoice that doesn't have the required farm of origin. And then other than farm direct, we found that grantees were most likely to report the farm of origin when they purchased from a food hub than all other channels. In fact, grantees reported 45 different farms through food hubs that year. And regardless of what market channels they used, we found that grantees could identify an average of 5 farms as the sources of their purchased foods throughout the year. Some grantees reported less, some more. We even had a few outliers that reported as much as 20 to 30 farms throughout the year. So there was some variation among the grantees. All right, I'm going to dive deeper into the farm impact now. And I mentioned this already, but we identified 100 different farms throughout the year, and they were located in 30 different counties across the state. And not all farms sold direct to the grantees. In fact, many sold their products to other vendors who then sold their products to grantees. So in this table, you can see real examples from our purchasing data of how farms sold their products to reach our grantees. In the first line, we see a farm, we're calling it Farm A, and they sold 2 different types of vegetables. And they were relatively small in terms of percent of all farm sales. They just had 2%. And they sold their products to a broadline distributor, specialty distributors, and a food hub. And it was through those channels that they reached 12 public schools and districts. And then we estimated the potential reach based on enrollment numbers and meal count numbers. And we could estimate about 41,000 children could have been served their products in their school or center's meals. Then example below that, you can see we have a farm B. They sold 2 different types of fruits, 1 type of vegetable. They were pretty large. They had 21% of all farm sales. They sold to a food hub and a food processor. And through those channels, they reached 1 schools, 3 ECEs, and 1 RCCI, which is a residential childcare institution. And we could estimate almost 55,000 children could have been served their foods through the year. And then I'll skip to the last example, Farm D. They sold quite a variety, 15 different types of vegetables, just 2% of farm sales, but they did sell direct to some grantees as well as through a food hub. And so through those channels, they reached 2 different public schools and an ECE, and they reached almost 5,000 children throughout the year. So as I wrap up today, I wanted to quickly share some survey responses from the grantees that we collected throughout the year, and they're about the influence of the 10 cents program on their farm and supplier relationships. We found nearly half of all the grantees affirmed that 10 cents did allow them to make new connections with farmers or local food suppliers. And this is a real quote from a grantee. They said, "We got to get to know a local farm and build a positive relationship by using their product to feed the students better items and better quality. We also got to help the farmer by promoting their products to the community." And then below that, we can see that we found the majority of grantees said that 10 cents did allow them to improve their existing relationships with farmers or food suppliers. And one grantee said, "We have been able to get more produce from our vendors, and they're telling others about our program, and we are modeling using fresh produce for others." We also looked at the different responses that grantees shared, and then we grouped them into themes. And we found that 41% of grantees talked about how 10 cents increased the demand for local products. 13% also said it helped them improve their relationships. 10% said it helped them improve logistics. So an example of that would be improved delivery methods and options. And then 9% said it helped them with communications. And here are 2 real quotes from grantees. Sorry, it's a little tiny at the bottom. The first says, "I think the big thing is the distributors, they are carrying more Michigan products and see it as a necessity to be competitive." And then the second quote below that says, "Many farmers have been helpful by letting us order bulk quantities or smaller quantities by the pound." And then lastly, we did ask grantees throughout the year, what did they need to support their local food purchasing efforts? And what we found was that there's a huge demand for more local foods by our grantees. 11% talked about wanting more local foods to purchase through the year. 10% said they wanted more suppliers and farmers to purchase from. Some wanted a list of both vendors to find local food as well as a list of products. And then almost 8% said they wanted more local food options from their current vendors, like their distributors. Our findings showed that the demand for local foods by the 10 cents grantees is growing, and they want to purchase more from new and existing suppliers to support their farm to school programs. This is a huge opportunity for Michigan farms and food businesses right now, and we encourage those interested to start looking into this market. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Lori Yelton to talk about resources for producers.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Lori Yelton. I'm with the Michigan Department of Agricultural Development. I am the Nutrition and Food Management Consultant for the department and work a lot in the area of food safety outreach. Next slide. So I really want to go over some resources that are available. And the reason I really want to go over these just so that if you don't know, a lot of our food school authorities really seek some kind of food safety when they look into these products. So they'll be asking farmers. So we do everything we can within the state to try to help provide those materials, those trainings that we can. We have a great team. This is just gives you a list of some of the people involved. Michigan Department of Education, again, works with 10 cents a meal. So does Groundworks, as Megan had said earlier. We have the Michigan Farm to Institution Network through MSU, the Department of Ag, and we have a food and farming systems that also helps with training, especially with group gap and some other food safety things. Next slide. So this slide really gets into the bulk of resources. The first one under MSU Extension shows you that Food Agri Safety Team. That team that's the link for the team, but if you go down 3 more where it says Produce Safety Alliance Training, they are the ones that really help with that. So that Produce Safety Alliance training is really a grower training that meets the requirements by FDA as one way to start working toward the FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act, the safety rule, to get the farm in the realm of that they are practicing that what is necessary for that if they fall into that category for FSMA. So they do a lot of food safety training. That link down on the bottom, the Food Safety Alliance training, just so you know, MSU does have one coming up on March 13th. It's $85 to attend, but it really is something that you really get you into the step of moving on to getting your farm into that mode of having a food safety readiness review done for the Food Safety Modernization Act. The other one there that there's a food safety plan template, and that's MSU Extension as well as our conservation district technicians will go out and they will work with the farmers on getting something. So this is one, especially small farmers, maybe somebody just getting interested, and schools are asking, well, what is your food group gap certified or gap certified, or do you have anything? And that can be very expensive. So there are other means of showing that you've practiced food safety. This is just one way of giving them something to get started. And the next link is a farm produce safety roadmap. And I asked Megan if she could bring it up real quick because I really like how this works for them. I'll go back to that map in just a second. This is a roadmap that just shows there's the produce safety education, fits into the FSMA produce safety rule. Once they've gone through that and had some of that training, then they can look at their risk assessment, really looking at where that food safety plan comes in, when you're assessing, is there a need for change, or am I looking at my risk and how am I going to deal with those risks if something does happen? So I really like this roadmap. I think if you go a little further down, does it give the on the farm readiness review? Yeah, it just gives them again that FSMA training, the readiness review, and then their actual certification. So that's just something that, again, we offer as just another roadmap, just to make it easier for farmers when they're really trying to take the steps to move in that direction. And then if you go back, we can go to this slide. You can go to the next one, Megan. This is just a map. So Michigan is really unique in that we have this map of conservation district technicians, and they're mapped out. So if anybody's in Michigan on the call, you can look at your area and you can note who your technician is and who their phone number or their email is. But these are conservation technicians that can come out to your farm and help you with food safety. It is free and it's confidential. So this is just one of those things just to get you started, that you have a lot of questions. Again, they're only there to help. They're not there to do an inspection or anything like that. They're really just to get you started and help you with the questions you may have. And the next one, again, we offer a lot of trainings and events, and this is just to give you a few. We actually had a Kalamazoo Valley Community College coming up for our MIFS conference, which got postponed due to the bad weather last week, but that's to be announced. So if anybody's interested, just keep an eye out. We also have Cultivate Michigan marketplace events coming up throughout the state of Michigan. There's a lot of MSU extension trainings. And again, there's that Produce Safety Alliance training that I talked about on March 13th. It is remote, and again, it's about $85. And that's all I have to offer, but I would be open to any questions if you have any. Thanks.
I'm just going to add in one last little bit. That's a wrap for today. Next week's going to be our last webinar of the series, and we're going to talk about the big picture of the 10 cents program, and we'll explore how the program was reaching towards its goals. That's actually going to feature Wendy Crowley from the Michigan Department of Education, and she runs the 10 cents program. And then I'll also note again that the previous webinar, What Foods Were Served, that was canceled, and we're going to be releasing a recording very soon. So here's our contact information, the whole team. If you have any questions about evaluation or local food sourcing, feel free to reach out to myself or Colleen Matz. Here's Lori's contact information that you just saw here. And then if you have any 10 cents needs, you can reach out to Wen from MDE or Melanie and Amanda over at Groundwork. And then all of this is also available on our website, 10centsmichigan.org. So that was quite a whirlwind, but we're opening it up for questions. If you have any thoughts, or maybe you want to share anything, maybe you participate in the program, we'd love to hear from you guys.